Hello chaps and chapesses, and this week we're going to talk about my top 10 GT flies with Kieran Jenkins from Fullingmill. This week, Kieran has come down from Fullingmill to chat to us about their flight range. We've had an enormous amount of input on the Fullingmill fly range for saltwater for the last 7 or 8 years. Many of the patterns which we have sourced from around the world, we have not been able to find here in the UK, so there had to be a way for our clients to have flies for their trips. So we've been working in conjunction with Fullingmill for this time. So Kieran's come down, he's brought us some of our favourite patterns to look at, and today we're going to go through my top 10 GT flies. We'll start right at the bottom. We'll start at number 10. Number 10 is my tan brushy profile. So the tan brushy was one of the original GT patterns, first developed from tigerfish flies. And the big difference between this and the flashy profiles that we had been using before was mostly the use of craft fur and spinning the material. So that gives you this lovely big profile and a big bush and brush, and most importantly, these flies don't get trashed on the first time that they get used, which is really important because GTs just smash the hell out of these things. The tan brushy is a staple pattern. It's one of the most used flies in the Indian Ocean, and one that we've come to love very affectionately. It also works through the Indian Ocean and the Pacific as well for Christmas Island and all the anywhere you find GTs. That's a go-to fly.
Go-to pattern. Nice.
It's got a bit of flash in it, lots of movement. It's a great fly to start with. So that comes in as my number 10. Everybody should have those in their GT selection. Next was a fly developed by Wayne Haslew on Alphonse. It's called the Cosmo Critter. Well, when he was working on Alphonse, but he was also guiding down at Cosmolido, so he developed this, the Cosmo Critter. The Cosmo Critter is this wonderful kind of amalgamation of all of those kind of key elements that fish love to hit. So you've got some shrimpy type eyes that stuck out the back, we've got some rubber legs, we've got some flash, again, lots of mobile craft fur and marabou in the underbody, makes the fly really pulse. And it's kind of a combination of a sort of shrimpy, squiddy type thing. Yeah. So GTs just love those. All of these are tied on 6.0 Gamakatsu hooks. Really good, solid hook. Originally the Trey Coombs big game hook, and developed into the SL12. So that's just, again, another complete staple pattern. So that goes as my number 9. Let's try and get it in the box. Well, it doesn't really matter. Do you know what? I'm just gonna throw it over there. I can't put it back in the box. I'll sort that out later. Next one, which would be number 8 on my list, is the GT Tan Clouser. Clouser's brilliant fly, used all over the world. One of the ones which is massively underrated and overlooked for GTs, because no one thinks of fishing something that sparse. Right. But where these really come into their own is when you're fishing on the flats and you're fishing at GTs on the back of rays, because the GTs hanging around the rays a bit like permit do, and they're sitting there looking for shrimps, crustaceans and various other bits and pieces which are escaping and fleeing. So as soon as you chuck that in on the back of the ray, smashes it. So it's just a really simple, effective pattern. Again, one of those ones which is weighted, it's got a bit of weight to it, so if you're fishing in, you know, maybe 1.5 feet of water, it's really useful to get the fly down on top.
Down there quickly.
But again, same hook, and I'll throw that one over there because I'm getting used to this. So number 7, the GT Mullet. The GT Mullet. Oh, thank you very much.
Glamorous assistant.
Oh, thank you very much. Very glamorous, Kieran. So the GT Mullet is a fly devised by James Christmas. Again, it's an Indian Ocean pattern, and the big difference between the GT Mullet and, say, an ordinary flashy profile is if you feel inside it, it's actually got a bit of a keel. Right. Which what they do is they put a bit of an epoxy resin on the inside, and that holds that fly straight up in the water column. Right. So when it swims on a dead line. And originally, this one was one of his flies that he developed from watching mullet flee from GTs around the edge of the atoll.
Yeah.
So, you know, staked out on his skiff, he'd sit there and he'd watch their behavior. And he always noticed that they chased these things and they were swimming in that vertical position. So that's where he came to mimic that.
Good.
So that's another really good GT mullet. Number 6 on my list. Now here we're going to get a bit of flamboyancy going on here, a bit of flaming Lamborghini. So if you could pass me that filthy red looking thing.
Lovely.
Now that's got some real flash and colour to it. Nothing's going to miss that. I mean, wow. So this fly was originally tied to mimic lyre-tailed grouper and some of the small coral trout and various other little orangey red patterns that swim around the coral heads. So you see these amazing greeny blue structures on the edge of the flat, and you see these wonderfully coloured little red and orange fish which are swimming around those. And again, you know, you'll be sitting there watching and suddenly the fish just smashes into them and then disappears off. That's why you see so many GTs with sort of scars and cuts on their heads, because they actually just headbutt the coral to hit these things. So this has been a firm favourite for some time. Got some real colour in there, especially good on murky water. So there's the flaming Lamborghini. Into number 5, the Nyap. So the Nyap stands for not your average popper. This is tied in a black pattern. Fullingmill recently brought these on instead of the original white pattern. Black just seems to lend itself better to a shadow profile. I'm a real fan of the Nyap. As James very kindly pointed out when he developed this, is that even clients can cast this one. It's particularly useful when you're fishing along the surf line, because when you're fishing in up to your waist in water, you're fishing the surf edge, what tends to happen is when you're fishing with heavier flies, they get stuck on the coral all the time. So if you're fishing with a Nyap, what that does is create that water disturbance in the surf, and it quite often pulls the fish in towards you. So you can really use it as an attractor pattern. If you're going to do a bit of blind fishing as well off the edge, that's also another really great fly. Much easier to fish with than your standard popper, because you know it doesn't have that great big bucket on the front, and you're
narrowness of
casting it and knocking it around. So it's an easy one to cast, cuts through the wind. So number 4 is a further development of the brushy fly. It's the black and purple brushy, which is this one here. So black and purple has become a colour which is synonymous with GT fishing. It tends to have a better profile than maybe some of the tan flies. In clear water, funnily enough, the black flies show up better, and the black and purple has been a long favourite of mine. I think it sort of almost simulates a bleeding bait fish. You've got a little bit of this sort of red tinge and looks like a bit of blood. You know, a bit of blood in the water is exactly what we like.
Good.
So that's the black and purple brushy, and I would probably pick that over the top of a tan one, to be honest. It's just a little bit more visible. That's that one. Then we're on to number 3, getting closer to my favourite. So that is going to be Alex Rook's mantis shrimp. Alex does a lot of fishing all around the world, as you know, and he is particularly clever when it comes to devising new and peculiar sparkly type patterns, and you may have seen in one of my earlier videos I'm a little bit of a fan of rubber and I like things with rubber in them. Anyway, I'll stop that now, sorry. Again, that's another awesome pattern for fishing off the back of rays. So when you get rays mugging around, that is a perfect fly to start throwing at GTs. And you guys tie this up in 2 different sizes now. So you've got this smaller one, which is ideal for bluefins and various other smaller species, and then you've also got a much bigger one, which is here in the box, which is tied on a 6-0 again, and that's another big mouthful for a jeet, but they do love those. So that's the mantis shrimp, number 3. Number 2 is the magnetic minnow. The magnetic minnow originally was devised by a guy called Cliff Rochester in South Africa. This is one of those flies which was tied up specifically for a small grouper pattern. And this one, it was the little peacock groupers that swim around, and they do love those to snack on. And what I particularly like about the magnetic minnow is there's a large amount of DNA hollow in this, which means it sloughs off water really quickly. So it doesn't absorb the water, which means when you're casting it, it's quite easy to cast. Again, you've got the black and purple colours, but it's particularly good in bright sunlight because it reflects and flashes like a crazy thing. Oh, I just love it. So I've caught a lot of fish on those. Actually, there's one of these stuck in the mouth of the fish on the front of the Rio GT line box on that. So that's one of my ultimate favourite patterns. You do have to be slightly careful with this one though, with the hollow, is that it can get wrapped around the hook. So you have to check it every so often and make sure that it hasn't got tail wrapped. But other than that, really good profile on that fly. Very fond of that one. At number 1 comes in the gym sock. Now the gym sock was one of those flies which was originally developed actually not as a GT fly but as a roosterfish fly.
Yeah.
Along the west coast of the States, Baja, Mexico, and that was developed by a guy called Mike Reiser. And Mike was a very serious rooster fisherman, and this was one of his patterns. And what makes this one different is you've got a big profile here, but you don't have an awful lot of bulk in the fly, because what he's done is he ties in a clump of yarn in the head there. And what that does is splay out the fibers, so you get this really big profile, and you'll be able to see this from the front. It gives you a big bulky profile on your fly, but it's very little material, so it doesn't weigh very much, and again it's easy to cast.
Right.
And what I tend to do with these sometimes is, depending on where I'm fishing, I take a black marker and I put more bands on them too. And then on other occasions they're great just as they are. But that is my number 1 GT go-to fly, whether I'm in the Indian Ocean or whether I'm in the Pacific. That's the one for me.
So before Pete steals these and takes them away to his favourite destination, we'd like to offer them to our YouTube fans. If you leave a comment down below with why you think you deserve them, we'll pick a winner in a week's time.
Are you sure I can't have them?
No.
As always, I hope you found that video useful.
Yep.
Please like and subscribe to our channel, and please also check out the Fullingmill channel. You'll find a lot of great patterns tying up over there, and you'll find a subscribe link right here. So please go and check that out and subscribe to their channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks for coming, Kieran.
No problem.